The first thing he heard was laughter. Not the kind that drifts soft and polite across a quiet evening, but a wild, unrestrained burst that didn't belong to trouble at all. It echoed through the dry creek bed like it had no business being there, bright and stubborn against the slow hush of the western land. He reined his horse in without thinking, his hand tightening on the worn leather as he listened again, making sure he hadn't imagined it. There it was again. Laughter, right in the middle of nowhere. He turned his head toward the sound, scanning the stretch of cracked earth and shallow water ahead. The creek wasn't much this time of year, just a muddy ribbon cutting through the land, stubbornly holding on after the last rains. Nothing about it seemed worth laughing over. If anything, it was the kind of place a person avoided unless they had no choice. Yet someone was there. He nudged his horse forward, cautious but curious. The air carried the scent of wet soil, thick and heavy, and the quiet creak of his saddle felt louder than usual. As he got closer, the shape of a figure came into view, half hidden by a bend in the creek, and then he saw her. She was stuck. Right there in the mud, boots swallowed nearly to the knees, her dress soaked and smeared with dark patches of earth. Her hair clung to her face in damp strands, and her hands were braced on her thighs as she tried, and failed, to pull herself free. But she wasn't panicking. She was laughing. Not just a little, but fully, head thrown back, eyes squeezed shut like the whole situation was the funniest thing she had ever known. It didn't make sense. Most folks would be cursing their luck or crying out for help. She looked like she had stumbled into a joke only she understood. He slid off his horse slowly, boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. For a moment he just stood there, watching her. Something about the scene felt unreal, like a story told over a campfire that you wouldn't quite believe until you saw it with your own eyes. "You planning on staying there all day?" he called out, his voice cutting through her laughter. She looked up at him then, still smiling, cheeks flushed and eyes bright despite the mess she was in. "I might," she said, catching her breath. "It's as good a place as any, I suppose." He raised a brow, taking a few careful steps closer to the edge of the mud. "Doesn't look too comfortable." "It isn't," she admitted, another laugh slipping out. "But it's too late to mind that now." He should have focused on the problem. On the mud, the risk of getting stuck himself. The simple task of pulling her out and moving on. That's what any sensible man would do. Instead, he found himself studying her. There was something strange about her calm, something that didn't match the roughness of the land around them. Most people out here carried a certain hardness, shaped by dust, distance, and long days. She didn't. Even covered in mud, she seemed untouched by it in a way he couldn't quite explain. "How'd you end up like that?" he asked. She glanced down at her boots as if seeing them for the first time. Took a wrong step, then another. After that, it didn't matter much. He let out a quiet breath, shaking his head. "You're lucky I came by. I was hoping someone would," she said, meeting his eyes again. "Though I didn't expect it to be you." That caught him off guard. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to," she replied, her smile softening just a little. "You heard me, didn't you?" For a second, neither of them spoke. The wind moved lightly through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called out. The world felt oddly still, like it was waiting for something to happen. He stepped closer, testing the ground with his boot. The mud shifted slightly, thick and stubborn, ready to claim anything that wasn't careful. He reached for the coil of rope at his side, fingers moving out of habit, but his gaze stayed on her. "You're going to need help," he said. "I figured that much," she answered. He tossed one end of the rope toward her, watching as she caught it with muddy hands. Their eyes met again, and for a moment, the whole wide stretch of land seemed to shrink down to just the two of them, standing on either side of that stubborn creek. He didn't understand it. Didn't understand why her laughter still echoed in his mind, or why something in his chest had shifted the moment he saw her. It wasn't like him to linger, to hesitate, to feel anything more than what was needed, and yet he did. He tightened his grip on the rope, planting his feet firmly. "Hold on," he said. She nodded, wrapping the rope around her hands. He pulled once, testing the tension, the mud resisting just enough to remind him this wouldn't be easy. And as he leaned back, ready to drag her free, he had the strange, sudden feeling that the moment her boots left the mud, nothing in his life would stay the same. The rope went taut. And then something shifted beneath the surface. The rope went tight in his hands, and he leaned back, boots digging into the damp ground. For a moment, nothing happened. The mud held her like it had no intention of letting go. Then it shifted again, a slow, heavy pull from below, as if the creek itself was deciding whether to give her back. "Don't rush it," she said, her voice steadier now, though the laughter still lingered in it. "I ain't rushing," he replied, adjusting his stance. "You just hold on," he pulled again, harder this time. The rope stretched, her arms tensed, and the mud made a thick, sucking sound that turned his focus sharp. He had seen this before. Creek beds like this could be tricky, deeper than they looked, strong enough to drag a man down if he stepped wrong. "You alone out here?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the ground beneath her. She hesitated, just a second too long. "I was." That answer sat strange with him. Folks didn't wander out this far without a reason. Not in this part of the country, where the land didn't forgive carelessness. He gave another steady pull. One of her boots shifted slightly, but not enough. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "From the road," she said lightly. "Oh, what used to be a road? That don't tell me much." She smiled again, though it wasn't as bright as before. "It tells enough." He let that pass, but it added to the feeling growing in the back of his mind. Something about her story didn't line up. Not with the way she looked, not with the way she carried herself. Even covered in mud, she didn't seem lost. She seemed like someone who had chosen a path and ended up somewhere unexpected along the way. He shifted his grip and pulled again, slower this time, working with the ground instead of against it. The mud loosened a little more, her left foot coming up an inch before sinking back. She let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "Feels like it's holding a grudge. Creek don't care about grudges," he said. "Just takes what it can." For a moment she went quiet. The wind picked up slightly, rustling through the dry branches along the bank. He noticed then how still everything else was. No sound of wagons, no distant voices, not even the usual signs of passing riders. Just the two of them. "You always ride this way?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes." "Then you must know it well." "Well enough," he said. "Well enough to know you shouldn't be here." She looked at him carefully as if weighing something. "And yet, here I am." He met her gaze, steady and unreadable. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Another pull, stronger this time. The mud gave more noticeably, her right leg shifting free just enough to bring a flicker of relief to her face. "That's one," he said. "Feels like winning a battle," she replied. "Ain't the war yet." She laughed again at that, though it came softer now, mixed with something else he couldn't quite place. Tiredness, maybe, or something deeper. "Where's your horse?" he asked. She glanced past him, toward the open stretch of land. "Got spooked. Took off not long after I got stuck." He followed her gaze, scanning the horizon. Nothing, no movement, no sign of tracks from where he stood. "Strange place for a horse to bolt," he said. "Strange day all around," she answered. He pulled again, and this time her leg came free with a wet, heavy sound. She stumbled forward slightly, catching herself with the rope before falling deeper into the mud. "Easy," he warned. "I'm trying," she said, her breath coming quicker now. He steadied himself and gave one more careful pull, guiding her toward firmer ground. The mud resisted, clinging stubbornly to her remaining boot, but it was losing its hold. As he worked, his mind kept circling back to the same thought. Something had scared that horse. Something close enough, sudden enough, to send it running without a rider. "You hear anything before you got stuck?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just the wind. That don't spook a horse like that." "Maybe it wasn't the wind," she said quietly. That made him pause, just for a moment. "Then what was it?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the far end of the creek, where the land dipped and twisted out of sight. "I don't know," she said finally. But it felt like something watching. The words settled between them, heavier than they should have been. He had spent enough years out here to know the difference between fear and imagination. And whatever she had felt, it hadn't been nothing. He tightened his grip again, pushing the thought aside for the moment. "We'll worry about that after you're out." She nodded, though her eyes didn't leave that distant bend. He pulled once more, harder than before. The mud gave way with a final, reluctant shift, her last boot sliding free as she stumbled forward onto firmer ground. For a second she leaned into the rope, catching her balance. Then she let go, standing there, breathing hard, mud dripping from her clothes. He stepped closer, reaching out without thinking, steadying her by the arm. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up at him, her expression different now. The laughter was still there, but it had changed, quieter, edged with something uncertain. "I think so," she said. He nodded, but his attention had already moved past her, back toward the creek. Because the mud they had just fought against wasn't settling? It was shifting again, slow and deliberate, as if something beneath it had only just begun to move. He did not like the way the mud moved. It was not the usual settling that came after a struggle. This was slower, almost careful, like something shifting its weight beneath the surface. He narrowed his eyes, stepping slightly in front of her without thinking, his body turning toward the creek as if it were something that could answer back. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. She did not argue, that alone told him enough. The laughter had faded now, replaced by a silence that felt too sharp for someone who had been joking moments ago. The creek looked the same at a glance. Mud, shallow water, scattered stones, but when he focused, he saw it again. A faint ripple, not from the wind, not from anything on top, but from underneath. It traveled a short distance, then stopped. "You see that?" he asked. "Yes," she answered, her voice low. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. "Could be nothing? It doesn't feel like nothing." He glanced at her. Her eyes were fixed on the same spot, but there was something else in them now. "Not just fear, recognition. You've been out here before," he said. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Not exactly here, but close enough." "That's not much of an answer. It's the only one I have right now." He let that sit. Pressing her would not change much, not with whatever was going on in front of them. Still, the pieces were starting to form something he did not like, a missing horse. A wrong turn that felt too easy. And now this. The land out here held stories. Most were just talk, passed between riders and townsfolk when the nights got long. But every now and then something happened that made those stories harder to ignore. He had learned to trust what he could see, what he could touch. Right now, what he saw was mud that did not act like mud. "You got family nearby?" he asked, keeping his tone even. She shook her head. "No one close? Then where were you heading?" She looked away from the creek, out toward the open land where the sky stretched wide and empty. "There's a place past the ridge, old cabin. I thought I could make it there before dark." He followed her gaze. He knew the ridge she meant. Knew the cabin too, or what was left of it. Folks used it once, years back, before the water shifted and the land turned harder to live on. "Ain't much there now," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I chose it." That answer carried more weight than she let on. He could hear it in the way her voice settled, like she had already made up her mind about something long before she reached this creek. "You running from something?" he asked. She met his eyes again, and for the first time she did not smile. "Aren't we all in one way or another?" He almost pushed further, but the ground shifted again, sharper this time. A low, wet sound rose from the creek like air being forced through thick earth. It was not loud, but it was enough to pull his attention back fast. The ripple came again, closer to the edge now. He stepped back, guiding her with him. "That ain't right." "No," she whispered. They moved a few paces up the bank, boots pressing into firmer soil. From there he could see more clearly. The surface of the mud bulged slightly, then sank, as if something underneath had tested the space and withdrawn. His hand moved to his side, resting near his belt out of habit. There was no clear threat, nothing he could name or point to, but his body had already decided this was not a place to linger. "We should go," he said. She did not move. He looked at her, frowning. "You hear me, I hear you," she said. "But listen," he did. At first, there was nothing but the wind again, brushing through the dry trees. Then, faint and distant, something else reached them. A sound that did not belong to the creek. Hoofbeats, far off, uneven, like a horse running without direction. "That yours?" he asked. "It sounds like it," she said, her voice tightening. The sound came and went, carried by the wind, hard to place. It did not seem to be getting closer. If anything, it circled somewhere beyond the ridge, out of sight. He frowned. A horse that ran that long should have slowed by now, found its way back, or at least settled. This one had not. "Something's got it spooked bad," he muttered. She wrapped her arms around herself, mud drying along the fabric of her sleeves. "I told you. It wasn't just the wind." He nodded slowly, his thoughts turning sharper. If something was out there, something strong enough to send a horse running blind, then this creek might not be the only place acting strange. "Then we don't stay," he said firmly. This time she agreed. She took a step back from the edge, then another, putting distance between herself and the shifting mud. But as they turned to leave, the ground behind them gave a sudden, heavy sound. They both stopped. It came from the creek, louder now, not just a ripple, not just a shift, something deeper, like a break in the earth itself. He turned back, jaw tightening. The surface of the mud split slightly, a dark line forming where there had been none before. And for a brief second, before it closed again, he could have sworn he saw something move beneath it that was not mud at all. He did not wait to study it longer. "Move," he said, his voice firm now, leaving no room for doubt. She turned with him, and they started up the bank, putting distance between themselves and the creek. The ground felt solid under his boots, but his mind stayed fixed on what he had just seen. That brief movement under the mud did not sit right. It was too deliberate, too alive in a place that should have been still. They walked fast at first, then slowed as the slope evened out. He kept his ears open, listening for anything out of place. The wind moved across the land in long, low breaths, carrying the dry scent of dust and brush. For a moment it almost felt normal again. Then the hoofbeats came back. Clearer this time. He stopped and turned toward the sound. It echoed from somewhere beyond the ridge, not far now. The rhythm was uneven, like the horse was tiring but still pushing forward. "That's close," he said. She nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "It shouldn't be running like that for so long." "No," he agreed. "Something's driving it." They stood there, both listening, both trying to place the direction. The land stretched wide, broken only by low rises and scattered trees. It was easy for sound to twist and travel out here. "We head for the ridge," he decided. Higher ground, better view. She did not argue. Together they started toward it, their pace steady but cautious. Every few steps he glanced back without meaning to, half expecting to see the creek behind them shifting again, spreading, following. But it stayed where it was. Still, that feeling did not leave him. The sense that something had noticed them. As they climbed, the ground grew drier, the soil firm and cracked underfoot. The air felt lighter here, less heavy than near the water. He could see farther now, the land opening up in all directions. And then they saw the horse. It burst into view from the far side of the ridge, moving fast but without direction, just as the sound had suggested. Its head was high, eyes wide, and its path made no sense, circling and veering like it could not decide where safety was. "That's mine," she said, stepping forward. "Wait," he warned, reaching out slightly. "Something ain't right." The horse slowed for a moment, then jerked its head toward the creek, even from this distance. It let out a sharp, uneasy sound and backed away, hooves scraping against the ground. It was afraid, not of them, of something behind them. He felt it then, not as a sound or a sight, but as a shift in the air. The same way a storm announces itself before it arrives. The wind dropped suddenly, leaving a quiet that pressed in from all sides. "Don't turn around," he said, though he knew he was going to. She stood still beside him. "Is it behind us?" He did not answer right away. His eyes stayed on the horse, watching the way it refused to come closer, the way it kept its distance like there was a line it would not cross. Then he turned. The creek was farther now, a dull line of brown cutting through the land. From here, it should have looked harmless. Just mud and water, nothing more. But it did not. Even at this distance, he could see the change. The surface was no longer smooth. It shifted in uneven waves like something beneath it was moving along its length, not in one place. Not in one spot, moving, his jaw tightened. "That ain't just one place," he said quietly. She turned then, following his gaze. When she saw it, she did not speak. Her hand found his sleeve without thinking, gripping it lightly. "It's spreading," she whispered. He nodded once. Or, "It's waking up." The words hung there, heavier than he intended. He did not believe in things he could not name. But what he saw did not fit anything simple. The horse let out another uneasy sound, stamping its hoof. It wanted to run, but it had nowhere to go that felt safe. "We need to get off this ground," he said. "That cabin you mentioned, how far?" She swallowed, forcing herself to think. "Not far." "Past the ridge, down the other side?" "Maybe half an hour if we move steady." He glanced between the moving creek and the open land around them. Staying here was not an option. Whatever was happening, it was not staying put. "Then that's where we go," he said. She nodded, but her grip on his sleeve tightened slightly. "And if it follows?" He looked at her then, really looked this time. The mud on her dress, the tired edge behind her steady eyes, the way she still held herself together despite everything. There was fear there, but there was also something else. Resolve. "Then we stay ahead of it," he said. It sounded simple, too simple, but it was all he had. He let out a low whistle, calling to the horse. It hesitated, shifting its weight, still uneasy. Then, slowly, it took a step toward them, then another, as if trusting them more than whatever lay behind. "Easy," he murmured. The horse came closer, though it kept glancing back toward the creek, ears pinned slightly. He reached for the reins as it approached, his movements calm and steady. The moment his hand closed around the leather, the animal stilled just enough to breathe. "We move now," he said. She nodded and stepped closer to him, ready to follow. But before they could take more than a step, a low, deep sound rolled across the land behind them. Not loud, but wide. It came from the direction of the creek, rising from the ground itself, like something long buried had finally found a way to stir. The horse pulled back sharply, nearly breaking from his grip. He held on, heart pounding now. And for the first time since he had heard her laughter, he felt something close to real fear. Because whatever was out there was no longer hidden, and it was no longer staying in one place. The sound rolled through the ground again, deeper this time, like the land itself was shifting in its sleep. He tightened his grip on the reins, steadying the horse as it fought the urge to bolt. "We don't wait," he said, his voice sharp with decision. "We go now." She nodded, no hesitation left in her. He helped her up onto the horse first, guiding her carefully despite the mud still clinging to her clothes. Then he swung up behind her in one smooth motion. The horse tossed its head once, uneasy, but it did not run wild this time. It felt the urgency in them. He turned it toward the ridge. "Hold tight," he said. They moved. At first it was a steady ride, controlled, but as another low tremor passed through the ground behind them, he urged the horse faster. Hooves struck dry soil, then loose gravel, then climbed toward the ridge where the land rose just enough to give them distance. He risked one glance back. The creek was no longer a line. It had spread, dark and uneven, cutting through the land in slow, creeping movement. It did not rush like water. It advanced like something patient, something that knew it did not need to hurry. "Don't look back," she said quietly, as if she already knew. He faced forward again. The ridge came up quick, and they pushed over it, the horse breathing hard but strong. On the other side, the land dipped gently toward a stretch of scattered trees. Beyond that, just as she had said, stood the old cabin. It leaned slightly to one side, weathered by years of wind and sun, but it was still standing. "That's it," she said, her voice carrying a mix of relief and something else he could not yet name. He guided the horse down the slope, not slowing until they reached the tree line. Only then did he pull back on the reins, letting the animal catch its breath. For a moment neither of them moved. The air felt different here, still but not heavy, like whatever had been near the creek had not crossed this far. He helped her down first, his hands steady at her waist as she slid from the saddle. When her boots hit the ground, she swayed slightly, then steadied herself. "You all right?" he asked. "I am now," she said, though her voice was softer than before. He climbed down after her, keeping one hand on the horse as it settled. Then he turned, looking back toward the ridge. From here, the creek was hidden from sight. But the silence told him enough. It had not followed, at least not yet. They stood there a while, letting the quiet settle around them. The kind of quiet that comes after something you do not fully understand, but know you made it through. "You ever seen anything like that?" she asked. He shook his head. No, and I've seen a fair share out here. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from thought. I heard stories once about land that holds on to things. Old places that don't like being crossed. He glanced at her. You believe that? I didn't, she said. Not until today. He let out a slow breath. Maybe it's not about believing. Maybe it's just knowing when to leave. She smiled faintly at that. They walked toward the cabin together, the horse following close behind now that its fear had eased. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a simple space inside. Dusty, quiet, but safe enough for now. She stepped in first, looking around like she was seeing more than just the walls. I needed a place to stop, she said. Didn't think I'd find it like this. He leaned against the doorway for a moment, watching her. You still running? She turned to him, then shook her head slowly. No, I think I'm done with that. The words settled between them, simple but certain. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Good. This land's got enough trouble without people chasing it. She laughed softly at that, not wild like before, but warm and real. The kind of laughter that stays instead of echoing away. For a while, they said nothing more. He found an old bucket, checked the small space for anything useful, while she brushed dried mud from her sleeves. It felt almost normal, like any other stop on a long ride. But it was not. Something had shifted. Not just in the land behind them, but here too. You didn't have to stop, she said after a while. You could have kept riding when you heard me. He looked at her, then gave a small shrug. Didn't feel right leaving someone laughing like that in the middle of a creek? She smiled again, meeting his eyes. Good thing you didn't. There was a pause then, quieter but not empty. What happens now? She asked. He thought about that. About the road, the ridge, the creek that moved when it shouldn't, about the way her laughter had cut through all of it and stayed with him. Now, he said slowly, we rest a bit. Then we see where the trail goes. She nodded like that was enough. Outside, the wind picked up again, moving through the trees in a steady, calm rhythm, nothing like before. Just the land settling back into itself. Inside the cabin, the tension eased, replaced by something steadier. Not certainty, not answers to everything they had seen, but something better, a beginning. He glanced at her once more, at the way she stood there no longer stuck, no longer lost. And he realized something simple and clear. He had found her by chance, but leaving her behind was no longer something he could do. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the creek still lay quiet again, holding its secrets deep. But here, in this small, worn cabin, something else had taken root. And this time, it felt like something worth staying for. Thanks for watching this story. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this story and what kind of stories you want to see next. See you in the next story.